Welcome, everyone. This is our A.B. Freeman School of Business Study Abroad and Exchange webinar that is titled Know Before They Go. So this is information specifically organized for the families of the students who have been approved to study abroad in the Freeman programs for summer and fall of 24 or fall and spring, the whole academic year for 24-25. So while we're hosting this from family programs, my colleague Mary Hicks from the Freeman School of Business Study Abroad and Exchange office is your presenter tonight. So I'm going to turn things over to Mary, and then I'll join you again at the end when we are ready for the Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, Penny. And hello to everyone. I am happy to have this opportunity to connect with you guys. Tonight we've got a lot of ground to cover. So this is what we're generally the categories of things that we're going to be talking about. So I have a few words to say to you as family members. We're going to talk about how Tulane Study Abroad it works. What's next, booking and housing and travel, passports and visas, finances, academics, health and safety, and how you can help your student to get and stay involved. So, all right, but before we start talking about logistics, I do want to congratulate you and your student. This is really a remarkable experience that your students are getting ready to embark upon. And your presence in this webinar really does show how much you love them and you want the best for them. And it's really important that students can rely upon various sources of support in this time. We hope that this information allows you to support them better and help you to understand what they're going through and what's expected of them. It is a tremendous learning curve. It's like drinking from a fire hose. They're just dealing with so much information. We believe strongly that supporting them while allowing them to take ownership of this process provides them with the opportunity to take massive strides in maturity, self-reliance, and cultural literacy. This sometimes means that families need to kind of step back and allow your student to make tough choices and navigate through some tough situations on their own, and understanding when to step in and when to step back is a really important part of your role for you as you work through this with your student and various family members. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that, as support personnel, myself included, it's a tough thing sometimes to let students work through this as young adults as they manage this whole process. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how Tulane Study Abroad offices work. Most of you have figured out by now that Tulane has 2 study abroad offices. Our office is Freeman Abroad. We are a smaller study abroad office dedicated only to business programs. The larger study abroad office on campus we call OSA, for Office of Study Abroad, and that's for all NTC undergraduate students. So students in the business school can choose to do either the Freeman programs or OSA programs, but there are challenges associated with both. In the middle of my little Venn diagram, there are some of our students who are business students who are studying abroad with OSA programs, and they generally complete non-business requirements. But within this past year and a half, we have pre-approved some programs, some OSA programs for additional business credit, making it a little easier for our business students to study abroad with OSA. I'm going to click on this link and show you our website. So this is the Freeman Abroad website. And then I'm going to go back to our presentation and click on the OSA website. So you can see they look similar, but they're different. And they have different programs, different offerings, and different organizations. So it is important that students know which study abroad office they're working with and what each office does. So hopefully our presentation tonight will help you to understand some of that. In general, our programs are semester exchanges. That's the large majority of our programs. They're all direct enroll exchange programs. So here in Freeman Abroad, we send students to our partner institutions and we receive students from the partner institutions. So they're direct enroll exchange programs. We don't utilize providers where we're sending students to a company like CEA Kappa or CIEE. We just directly partner with business schools. Some of our business school partners are, top 20, top 50 business schools in the world. It's really amazing opportunities for our students to get this wonderful academic and cultural experience. Our students become students at the partner institution while maintaining their Tulane status. So they actually have their feet in two institutions. Because they enroll directly with the partner, they are required to participate in the host institution's practices. So they really do become a student at the partner institution. So they're enrolling there, they participate in the academic calendar at that school, whatever the start and end date is of that school. That's what our students have to follow. They can participate in student organizations. They can avail themselves of student support services. And most of our partners offer some housing options, but every partner is going to be different. We do have a select number of summer programs, and so we do have some students participating in them. Business students at Tulane traditionally work internships over the summer, so we don't have, it's a light participation, but these are still all offered by our partner institutions, and the program formats can really vary widely. Some are island cohort programs, and then others offer a wider variety of courses and different start and end dates for students. So it's quite different from the semester program. And it has a program fee that includes tuition, and it's different for different programs, that program fee. It's not Tulane tuition, it's a little different. That includes the program fee, the health insurance, and other amenities that vary by program. And then additional costs paid directly include such items as airfare, housing, local travel expenses. And in general, for our shorter term summer programs, students who are US citizens don't really have to apply for student visas to participate, except for maybe a country like China. So it's a little easier to do the short-term study abroad experiences. Students can do both summer and semester experiences. We have had students do that. They can do 2 summer study abroad experiences. So sometimes these are really a great fit for some of our students who want that quick and lesser credit bearing programs. All right, so I mentioned very briefly that we have started pre-approving some OSA programs with Freeman. That's so that students can transfer business credit back a little more easily if they participate in OSA programs. So there's a list of programs, and there are guidelines on our website. So basically, if you go to the semester abroad brochure page, you can see an overview of our general program information. And then at the bottom of this overview tab, you can read all about the non-Freeman Study Abroad program options that our students have and what all that means. Because it's not exactly, sort of cut and dry, because the business curriculum is rather, it builds upon itself and it's rather prescriptive. And so we work very hard to try to make sure that students can take the benefit of as many business credits as possible, working within the requirements of the business school and our faculty. So let's go back to the presentation. Give me a second. There we go. All right. In general, so the Freeman Abroad programs, these direct enroll exchange programs, the benefits that we see to students are that they have opportunities to study at top business schools internationally. They can take business classes generally not available at Tulane. We really do encourage students to take these electives that they couldn't take here. They can transfer 12 to 18 business credits. All the classes are offered in English, although many of our partners do have classes offered in the local language for our students who are fluent. And because Tulane's students maintain their Tulane status, most financial aid and scholarships apply. And that depends upon the terms of the individual awards, but for the most part, the student's financial aid package remains the same while they're on exchange. They also maintain access to all of the Tulane support, such as Crisis 24, which I'll talk about in later slides, travel services, advising, which comes from our office, as well as academic advising, the success coaching on campus, tutoring, counseling, and more. So all that continues while the student's on exchange. One thing that is important to understand that our office does not do, we do not apply for housing on behalf of students. We do not enroll students in classes at the host institutions. We can never alter a foreign transcript received from the partner institution, and we cannot intervene with a foreign country or partner institution's policies, procedures, academic calendars, and things like that. So we're sending the student on this exchange program where they become, you know, a global citizen, basically a student of that institution. So what's next? Your student has been offered placement at a host institution. How do they know what to do next? Well, we want them to consult their Freeman Abroad portal. So each student logs into the Freeman Abroad portal from our website with their Tulane login, and they have a whole list of things that they need to read or sign off on or download or upload. And so it's important that they are working their way through that information. It's quite a lot of information. We don't expect them to read it all at once. And we do want them to go back and refer to that information if they may not remember something. So it's a resource for them in addition to, you know, trying to help them prepare. At this point, most of our students have been nominated to their host institutions, and many are already working on their secondary applications. Some of them are complete with the secondary applications even. Each institution's timeline, procedures, and academic calendar is different. So, you know, for us to give parents an exact timeline of when a student should be doing what, or even to give that to the students, is relative to where they're going. All students should be reading, researching, and preparing such things as what kind of documents are they going to need for that secondary application. Some of them have to have official transcripts. Some of them have to have a copy of their passport. It just depends on what the host institution requires. What kind of preparations can be made for the student visa application? What's the host institution's academic and local culture like? Academic culture can be extremely different from one institution to the next, and definitely from one country to the next. The relationship between the students and the professors can be very different. The expectations of the students can be very different. And what students can expect from professors and fellow students can also be very different depending upon the local culture, local academic culture. They should be thinking about housing, looking into what they can book, and how can they connect with other students who've gone on these programs before. That information is in their portal. We provide them with a spreadsheet of prior participants. They can filter out for the program that they're going to, and we encourage them to do that. So I've thrown around a couple of terms here, and what does it mean when you say nominate students? So basically, once students have been accepted to a program, offered placement, and accepted and committed it here, we have to send their information to the partner institution because we're sending each exchange student as a representative of Tulane. So we send that information to the partner, and we therefore nominate the student to be an exchange student at the partner institution. Students can't apply directly for this exchange spot without our nomination. Once a student is nominated, then they're usually contacted by the partner institution in order to start their secondary application. So the partner institution needs the student's information, whatever information that they need to get them admitted to the university and, you know, get them a portal login and get them an email address. Most of our partners do have their own email system that they require the students to check, just like Tulane does. So our students are checking 2 email addresses, they're accessing 2 separate portals, they're doing 2 separate registration systems. This is why it's a big experience for them, and they do have to learn how to keep all that straight. So hopefully that helps you to understand kind of what I'm talking about when I'm using these terms. So after nomination, I just mentioned the students are going to receive instructions for the secondary application. Once that application is complete, generally students are going to start receiving official acceptance notification and communications from the host institution. That usually goes to their host institution to email address. So they really do need to be checking that host university email address as soon as they get it. They need to be on the ball with it daily. Generally, our host universities also issue an official acceptance letter that the student can then use to apply for their student visa if a visa is required. Every country is different for their visa requirements. Some require that students get a visa, some do not. And so we're going to talk about student visas in a few minutes, but it's important to remember that that can be very different from one place to another. I talked about number 4, and then, you know, the enrollment is something that it's important to understand that we're not enrolling students in classes. They're enrolling according to the host university's schedule, timeline, course offerings. Some of our students are already enrolling in courses at this point. Some of our students have to wait until July or August before they see their courses, and they can get it, you know, start talking about what they're actually going to enroll in. So we do try to help students navigate that process, but it's important that they're getting that information directly from the partner institution. All right, so let's talk about housing. A lot of times, as soon as students get their placement, they want to start booking housing. We generally ask them to kind of wait a little bit before they receive more, so that they can receive more information from the partner institution before completing those arrangements. But you know, in general, students do have to arrange their own housing. Some of them want to do the student housing. Some of them want to live in independent housing. We don't dictate whether or not a student has to do one or the other. If a partner institution requires that student stays in student housing, I think we have one partner in Singapore that does that, then the student does have to stay in the housing because that's that institution's policy. But for the most part, students can pick and choose between what they'd like to do. Now, a lot of our students need to sublet housing. So we have an incoming exchange student Facebook group that we set up every year, actually every semester. These are our students who have applied to come to Tulane as exchange students. They were nominated to us by the partners, and they're currently enrolled in their classes, and they're getting ready to come for the fall. So they're looking for housing. So we create these Facebook groups. And so this link is specifically for fall 2024 incoming exchange students. And we invite our outgoing exchange students to join it. They can post about housing, they can connect with students, they can do whatever they want. It is a closed group, so you have to request membership. Parents can request membership if you'd like to do the posting on your student's behalf. It just needs to look like a legitimate Facebook account affiliated with Tulane. We just don't want spammers and spoofers in the group. There's also a new off-campus housing portal that Tulane's housing office has provided. And so you'll be able to access this link when we share these slides with you. I do suggest that you also, I think it requires a Tulane login, so your student may have to do the logging in the posting, but I think it's a good resource for students. And that's a wider audience. That's the entire Tulane community that's looking for off-campus housing. Now, how to book travel. Tulane's travel management policy does require that students book their travel through Tulane's Concur travel system and or with World Travel Services. This information is in students' portals. The Concur system is an online travel booking system that students can just click on from Gibson. World Travel Services is the travel agency that's contracted with the university. So if a student needs to talk to a human being to book their international travel, which we recommend, it's a one-time fee that they pay. It's nominal, and it's a one-time fee per itinerary. So like if a student books a round trip ticket, then if they need to change their return ticket, then they just call World Travel Services again. They don't pay that fee again, and they can get help changing that ticket. In general, World Travel Services tries to reduce or eliminate layovers outside the United States, and they typically offer refundable fares. And Tulane also has access to that travel information, which is important because we want to be able to provide students with support in case of some sort of, global emergency like a pandemic. Basically, we want to make sure that we can assist Tulane travelers in case of some sort of emergency. In general, students are going to start knowing when they need to report to the host institution, and they're going to have a sense of when they can expect for that semester to end. But sometimes those end dates can change. Some of our partners don't even publish their final exam schedules until mid-semester. So sometimes we have students that do have to change their return flight. It's not very uncommon. It is quite common. And so it's good for family members to be aware of that and to not be surprised when your student calls and says, I gotta change my return. If a student cannot book via Concur, for example, if they want to use miles or points, they do need to email the travel management office to request an exception to the travel policy. Once that exception is approved, students must enroll themselves in the Crisis 24 Emergency Management Service. We'll talk about what that emergency management service is in a later slide. All right, let's start talking about passports and visas. Passports need to be valid for at least 6 months after the study abroad program ends. Most of the fall programs end in December. So that means that a student's expiration date on their passport should not be before June of 2025. If it's earlier than that, there's a chance they may not be able to get their student visa. So we really have tried very hard to get that messaging out to students. I haven't seen a student with a scary passport yet, so I'm hoping that we've gotten that message out to them and they're all okay. If they do need a passport, they need to get it now and request expedited service. I think the expedited service is actually a little quicker this year than last year. Last year was a hard year. If the current passport was issued prior to the age of 16, it's not a renewal application, but it's a new visa new passport application, and it might take longer than a renewal. So all the more reason to get that passport application in ASAP. Also, some of our students travel internationally during the expected visa processing time. So for example, if a student is applying for a student visa to go to France, their processing time is usually about 2 months. If they have a trip planned internationally within that 2-month period when they have to send their passport into VFS Global and the French Embassy, they might need to get a second US passport. I have a link here to the US Department of State's website telling citizens how to get a second passport. There are 2 methods. One is to mail it in, or one is to apply in person. So we usually suggest that students apply in person so that they're not mailing their 10-year passport in. And sometimes students will need a letter of support from our office in order to do that. All they need to do is reach out to us and request it, and we can provide that to the student. But it is important that the students are looking at that website and understanding what kind of documentation they need in order to complete that process. We do suggest expedited service for that as well, of course. All right, so your passport is your identification document, but in order to enter a country legally, you need a visa. Usually, as tourists, citizens of the United States of America have this luxury that we can visit a country, show our passport, and get an automatic 3-month tourist visa. When we're on that tourist visa, we usually cannot be students. We can't, work, and make money inside the country. We can, go there on a business trip. But to be a student and to live in a country, typically students will need what's called a student visa. And that's usually a stamp inside the passport that says, okay, this person is entering the country as a student, they're going to be here for a while, and this is the time period that they're going to be here. Some countries don't require the students have a student visa. Croatia is one. Denmark, they actually can enter, and Germany, they can enter on the tourist visa, and then they apply for a residence permit after they arrive. We do recommend using the visa wizard on many consulate websites to determine whether a visa is needed and what type is needed. So again, going to that primary source, the government of the country that that your student is visiting, and get that information directly from that country. We do have visa guidance information in students' portals, but it's not a primary source, and so there is a chance that the information could have changed. Students must apply for their visa independently, including students going to Spain. My next slide is talking about that. Requirements and timelines vary depending upon the country and the consulate. Requirements are generally extremely detailed, and students must read those instructions very carefully. Usually, you know, I find that I have to read those websites 2 and 3 times sometimes to really understand what those requirements are if I'm looking at it for the first time. Lack of attention to detail may result in visa processing delays and or rejection of a student's application. So, in today's world, when our young people are used to, quick skimming and things like that, this is a time when they have to learn to slow down and really read and interpret this information. It is important for students to understand that we cannot intervene on behalf of a student. We can't call the French consulate and say, hey, what's going on with the student's application? We can't request information on updates, and we have no sway with a country's immigration or consular offices. So it's really important that students are crossing their T's and dotting their I's. Now, the Spanish student visa application process. So as of November 28th, 2023, the Houston Consulate General of Spain outsourced their student visa applications to a company called BLS International Houston. That's their address and phone number information. Students can choose to apply for their visa in person by making an appointment or by postal mail at the address indicated above. For this reason, we're no longer doing the courier service. And so each student has to apply individually for their visa. We can advise students, or we do advise students to read the information very closely and consult those primary sources, but we can also consult with students. We've had a lot of students come in the last few weeks, going over their materials, trying to interpret this information. It's okay for them to make an appointment and come in and talk to us. Some students may opt to apply via the Spanish consulate under which jurisdiction their home address falls. For example, I spoke with a student the other day that really is more comfortable going to the Spanish consulate in New York. The New York consulate has different requirements and procedures than the Houston consulate. So it's important that a student identifies the consulate that they want to utilize and they follow those procedures. Most of the information that we have provided to students is based upon our experience with the Houston consulate. And because students are full-time Tulane students, they can apply via Houston. They have that choice. In addition to if they live in New York or something like that and can go to the New York consulate. So those students do have that choice. A student who is from Louisiana or from Texas is required to use the Houston consulate. BLS International does allow students, well, the Spanish consulate of Houston does allow students to either mail their passport or go to BLS International in Houston in person. We generally suggest that they do the mail application, but that does mean that they have to have it all in a package and it all has to be correct, and they mail it off to Houston, including their passport inside and a money order. So we want to help students be as careful as possible. We do have a couple of helpful documents that we have provided. We've given these links to students, but I thought it might be nice for our parents to have these links as well in this webinar. This first one is a cheat sheet, we call it. It is basically the Spanish application with our comments, guidelines, make sure you use the European style of date, or what to put in this box, put NA in these boxes, so really kind of specific instructions for students to use. The other document is a sample bank statement. Sometimes it can be frustrating to understand what they require in terms of a bank statement. They want to see an actual statement, not a screenshot from a bank account. It needs to be the monthly statement that shows the beginning and ending balances, And it has to be a checking or savings account. It has to be the most recent 3 months before the student applies for the visa. If a student doesn't have enough money in their account, a parent or guardian can act as sponsor, and then they provide a notarized letter and a notarized copy of their ID. Those instructions are on the BLS International Houston's website. It might be different for New York. So it's important that, again, they're consulting the requirements of the consulate they're going to go through. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about some finances. So basically, when students go on exchange, what they pay to Tulane are their tuition, the academic fee, and the study abroad fee. They don't pay the campus health fee, the Riley Center fee, and the campus activities fee. So it's a slightly different amount from what they normally pay in tuition, but it's very close to the same thing that they pay every semester. What they do not pay to Tulane are their housing, travel, passport visa costs, personal expenses, and local transportation, yada, yada. If you go to our website and you browse to the program that your student is going on, let's search for, here we go, University of Melbourne in Australia. Search for that. Go to the page. And here I can see all the public information associated with our exchange with the University of Melbourne. So I can download their fact sheet. I can see all kinds of great information. You can go through each tab to read more about that institution and how the academics work, what kind of housing they have. And here's that cost tab. That's going to show the basic, the base cost paid to Tulane, and then estimated costs here. This is actually a worksheet that students can edit in this bottom part. They can even add in their scholarships or financial aid, and it gives them the bottom line. Let's see, I'm going to give this student a little bit of financial aid here, and that changes that bottom line, which is nice. So family members can actually go to our public website and look up and see what the estimated cost of attendance would be for the University of Melbourne. All right. Generally, the billing is done through Tulane accounts receivable, and then the disbursement of college scholarships and financial aid. All that occurs according to the Tulane academic calendar and fee payment deadline. So it is important that Tulane students are still remembering to check Gibson, to pay their bills, to check their Tulane email, and not miss those important deadlines according to the Tulane academic calendar and payment, deadlines. They don't pay tuition to the host institution. It's important for them to know that and to remember that, but they do pay all the additional expenses directly. So let's say a student took a class that has an extra fee associated with it, they would pay that directly to the institution. Now, all of our students paid a non-refundable commitment deposit of $500. Once the student attends, shows up at the host institution and checks in basically and confirms their attendance, that money is then returned to the student's Tulane account. So in general, family members who are, looking at a student's Gibson account will see that $500 returned. It usually doesn't happen immediately. This is a large institution. Things take a little while, but generally by the middle of the fall semester, we see that those monies returned, except for Vienna, which starts much later than our regular semester. So that's usually October before our students see that. All right, academics. This is the fun part. The business school does have a rather, like I said, prescribed curriculum. In general, our students take, or they're enrolled in a credit placeholder at Tulane in order to keep their status and things like that, but we're not enrolling them in actual classes while they're abroad. In general, the classes transfer back as a 5380 or 5390 class number. Even if they take a class outside of business, it's still going to have that study abroad 5380 or 5390 class number. The business classes count only as electives, so they can either count towards their general business elective requirements or their major elective requirements. They cannot take core courses abroad. Those would be either business core or major core courses. So for example, our finance majors cannot take investments in equities abroad. Business minor and certificate classes also cannot be taken abroad. So basically, they're taking electives. They're expanding their business school acumen by taking these classes that are not part of the core curriculum of the school. Students can take non-business classes as long as they're offered by the partner institution, and they commonly do. One of the most common is economics, because a lot of times economics are offered in the business schools of our partners. And they can just get approval from that department if they want to transfer it in. So if we have a business major with an econ minor, they can request that equivalency from the econ department, and then usually they can count that as an econ elective towards their econ minor. Students must submit a learning agreement. This is like a document or a form that we have where they tell us what classes they're going to take. And we go through that with the students and we review what their major and minor is and how those classes can count towards their degree. It can be pretty complicated to interpret students' degree plans sometimes. And so we really try very hard to provide as much academic advising as we can to students. It's not a perfect system, but it definitely helps answer a lot of students' questions as they're enrolling in classes. All of the learning agreements are also reviewed by the students' business academic counselor. So that's their major advisor to make sure that they can get credit for those classes. So we do try very hard to make sure that they are getting classes that they can use at Tulane. Again, they enroll in their courses at the host institution. So it's really important for them to remember that they have to log into the portal and utilize whatever system that the host university uses. Those systems, those dates, those procedures vary extremely widely across the schools. And students are going to have to learn and navigate those portals and be informed of the host institution's policies, procedures, dates, and course offerings. Again, we cannot intervene in the policies, procedures, or academic calendars of our partner institutions. So let's say a partner institution changes the final exam date, or a professor changes the final exam date, and the partner institution, allows them to do that, and your student has a return date before that. We cannot intervene and ask them to change that exam date. The student will need to comply with that institution's policies and procedures. So it is an important thing to remember that they do become a student at that partner, and we don't tell our partners how to run their school. They can't do that with us. So, it's reciprocal. While the students are abroad, we do expect them to report back to us any changes in enrollment. Enrollment in each host institution is unique. And so the students just, they're making sure that they're trying to, get into the classes that are best for them. A lot of times what you think you're going to enroll in and what you actually end up enrolling in can be very different things. And so we recognize that, and we try to walk with students through that procedure. They do need to maintain full-time enrollment. They need to transfer back the equivalent of 12 Tulane credits minimum. And they're not allowed to take business classes on a pass-fail or a satisfactory or unsatisfactory basis. That's a curriculum rule in our catalog. And again, we talked about academic culture before. It is really important that students are understanding what academic culture they're in, because those misunderstandings can often lead to academic difficulties that could be preventable if the student has a better understanding of what the teacher's expectations might be, what the study culture is. A lot of European institutions don't really do a lot of assessment throughout the semester. They might have one exam at the end of the semester. That's the entire grade for the semester. And if the student's not prepared for that and they think, oh, nobody's really studying, nobody's really going to class, and they hit that exam at the end of the semester and they can't pass it, they're in trouble. And if they get an F in the class, we have to report it on their Tulane transcript, which doesn't feel good. So it's really important that students are very aware of what kind of academic culture they're in. All right, let's talk about a little health and safety. What about danger? What do we think? In general, when we start talking about crisis management, we talk about the big stuff first, right? Big old health emergency, car wrecks, military coups, terrorist attacks, you know, assault, all these kinds of things that we see as the big emergencies. What we don't often think about as the big emergencies are your culture shock, your dehydration, your hunger, hangover, homesickness. What we actually see in numbers is that we have far fewer of those big emergencies, and we have a whole lot of culture shock, dehydration, hunger, substance abuse, hangover, homesickness. It's stress. And so it's important that we are trying to provide students with support as they work through all of this, overwhelming emotions, the highs and the lows. It is a huge experience for them to go through. It's a huge adjustment. It's a lot to move to another country. And so it's very exciting, but it's also often overwhelming. And so it really is important for us to reinforce to students that they have to practice self-care. They have to take care of themselves and to be aware of the typical cycles that we go through in order to keep things in perspective. Sometimes it could be really helpful for family members to help a student decipher whether or not they need to, intervene, or whether you help your student navigate those very complex emotions. And this is an old model, but it sort of still rings true. It doesn't exactly, life doesn't always follow a model or a formula, but it's pretty common for us to go through these phases of culture shock, right? You first get there and everything's amazing. I'm in Japan, I'm eating sushi, people are so polite, it's so amazing. And then it gets overwhelming. And you start feeling anxious. And then you're like, wait, this is not so great. Life is hard here, and Japanese people are rule followers. And I don't know, there's no flexibility. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, maybe I need to go home. And that's when the family member gets the phone call at 3 a.m. I can't do this, I'm scared. And so if the family member can help the student work through that, sometimes it's major, but sometimes they have to go through that adjustment phase, and to really kind of understand that I'm not in Disney World. This is real life. I've got to work through it and learn how to accept things that aren't my favorite thing about where I am, Japan. So that acceptance phase of okay, I can do this. This will work. It's not perfect, but it'll work. And then, of course, when you come back, you do it all over again. I'm so happy to be home. Oh my God, it's so great. And then, oh, this about home and that about home, and then you work through it. So these are important cycles that we all work through, and recognizing them really can help one work through it. I have to admit, I've traveled abroad many, many times and gone through culture shock pretty much every time. And sometimes I recognize it, sometimes I don't. So when I have somebody there as a sounding board, it's always helpful. It is important to understand that mental health is sometimes a player in all of this anxiety and stress. And so sometimes if a person has a pre-existing condition, sometimes when you're going through a high stress period, the meds can work differently, or jet lag can make meds work differently. Some students have never struggled with mental health before, but things start to come up when they're going through this extreme stress. So it's really important for us to make sure that students have space to ask for help. If they are going through a mental health emergency, we encourage them to contact whoever they're comfortable with, right? A family member or local university staff. A lot of times our local university partners have resources for students. A lot of times they have counselors on staff that can speak English. For big emergencies, hospitalization or mental health crises, we do want students to contact Crisis 24 via the app. I'm going to show you the app in a couple minutes. They do provide comprehensive emergency management services, and they assist us with responding to these emergency situations. So we are a partner with Crisis 24. We work very closely with them when we have any kind of an emergency when abroad. So all of our Freeman programs, this does not hold true for Office of Study Abroad, but all of the Freeman programs, students are enrolled in the GeoBlue International Health Insurance Policy. The coverage date is included in the program. You don't pay any extra. You're already paying for it, and it's included, and students can't opt out of it. The coverage dates are 7 days prior to the orientation date, and then 7 days after the last possible date that the partner publishes, so that students have a little bit of, travel time before and after. The students are going to receive an enrollment email from GeoBlue. They should set up that login immediately. There is also a parent login. So if the student shares their certificate number with you, you can set up a parent login so you can see not their private information because of HIPAA, but the policy information, the coverage, and that sort of thing. So this is their website. So then you log in or register right here, and it's a very easy website to use. In general, we want students to know how to use their health insurance while they're abroad. We want them to carry that insurance card. They can print it off the website once they set up that login. They can also print a letter showing proof of coverage from that same website. Some student visa applications require that. Note, students going to Spain need a special letter. We request that letter from GeoBlue. We email it to students. The one that they can download from the site is not sufficient for the visa applications. Spain changed its visa requirements. We purchased a special policy to cover our students going to Spain. So we have to do this extra special step for our students going to Spain. We do recommend that students arrange for continued care. If they are receiving treatment here in the US, they can contact GeoBlue and help make sure that they don't interrupt their care if they need to have continued care on site. They do have a 24/7 emergency assistance number on the insurance card. Their coverage does include mental health, so it's not just physical health. And a lot of times GeoBlue can assist students with setting up non-emergency appointments and can sometimes arrange for direct billing. And, not everybody can get that direct billing arranged in time for the medical help that they're going to need. So sometimes students might have to pay for their medical services upfront and then file with GeoBlue for reimbursement. We always recommend that they keep itemized receipts for all services rendered, and then they contact GeoBlue for instructions on submitting a claim. And it's all through that website. It's important to remember that students have to maintain their domestic health insurance in addition to the GeoBlue coverage. If they have to come home, they have to have medical insurance. Tulane does require that they show that just like they do any other semester. So most of our students, I think, do the T-SHIP waiver. You have to do that even on the study abroad semester or purchase the T-SHIP coverage. If a student is traveling and they want to purchase additional coverage, they can contact GeoBlue directly to purchase that coverage. What do we suggest that students do in preparing for their own health and safety? We do suggest that they research on-site support services with the partner institution or in the local community. They might want to research local conditions that can impact their health. Encourage your student to report any and all Goldman Center accommodations to their host university. So if a student has anything like extended time or some other accommodation, they can report that to the host institution. It is important to remember that the Americans with Disabilities Act only is applicable in the United States, but most of our partners do have accommodations that are standard, and they can provide them to students as long as they're reasonable. So it's important for students to ask, and to ask ahead of time, because if it's a problem, then it's better to know it beforehand than after you're there. And it's important that if a student has healthcare providers that they need to stay in touch with, that they make those arrangements. And some countries have medication laws that are a little different. I mentioned Japan earlier. Stimulants like Adderall are technically illegal in Japan. And so a student should know that if they're currently on Adderall. While abroad, one more thing that I didn't include in this slide that I should have mentioned is if a student has a prescription that they can get for the whole semester and take with them, we do recommend that. So if a student wanted to bring, 4.5 months, you just arrange with the insurance company, take it with the student, don't put it in the checked luggage, put it in the carry-on luggage, and have the documentation with you, so that students don't have to interrupt their prescriptions. If they can't get that, then they should arrange for that continued care so that they can get a prescription written by the doctor on site and refill a prescription in country. We do want students to stay aware of world news while they're abroad, practice situational awareness. In the orientation, we often talk about not walking down the street with headphones in, or they call them pods, AirPods now, with the sound turned all the way up because then you can't hear what's behind you. We want students to monitor self-care, to practice, their exercise regimens, whatever it is that they need to take care of themselves. Remember that culture shock and adjustment waves and recognize when it's time to work through something or when it's time to ask for help. We want students to be aware of themselves. Tulane resources are still available to students while abroad, like the student support services, the Well, Title IX services, our office. Generally, we can provide support to students while they're abroad. All right, this is the Crisis 24 app. So Crisis 24 is that emergency response service. When students book their travel through Concur or World Travel Services, they are automatically enrolled in the Crisis 24 service. And then they can download this WorldQ app. It's a very easy to use hotline crisis signal, and it also has local emergency numbers for students. If a student does not book their travel through Concur, they have to enroll themselves in Crisis 24. It is a very effective service. We unfortunately had to utilize them a few times already this year. And so, yeah, I don't want anybody abroad without Crisis 24. We do also want students to look at the information on the U.S. Department of State's website for destination information. So you can look up information about Japan on the U.S. Department of State and see any kind of like advisories or anything that they make for U.S. travelers. They also have helpful information. And then we ask students to enroll in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program that's also offered by the Department of State. And it's not Big Brother tracking where you're going. It is instead, a list of people who are U.S. citizens in a certain location in case there's some sort of crisis. So basically, if you enroll in STEP and something happens, let's say in Madrid, we have a bunch of students in Madrid, something happens, the U.S. Department of State has that list of U.S. citizens who are there. They're going to start looking for people, and we don't have to give them a list, basically. Oh, so I forgot that I had this nice slide about Crisis 24. So I've talked about this already. This is all that Crisis 24 provides to Tulane and to our students. Even assistance with passport and visa replacement if they get their passport stolen. This is the information about Crisis 24 on the Tulane Global website. All Tulane travelers are eligible for Crisis 24. So even our faculty and staff and researchers who travel abroad are enrolled in Crisis 24. It's a very effective service. All right, and how do we help our students get and stay involved? We have almost an equal number of incoming exchange students every semester. They're a treasured member of our campus. They are treasured members of our campus community, and our students, they can have that social interaction with these students, and they also provide valuable insights in their academic work and in their classroom discussions. So it's, it goes both ways. We're sending Americans abroad. We're receiving students. I think we have students from 15 countries this semester. So we encourage our students to get engaged and get involved with our International students, they can join our student group called Global Guides. And we have a weekly cafe where they can come and just have coffee and meet people from around the world every Tuesday from 2 to 4 in the LBC. It's a lot of fun. So we love our international exchange students, and we hope that your students will help them to feel welcome while they're here at Tulane, just as their cohorts are doing while our students are abroad. All right, so that concludes my presentation. Hopefully you found this helpful. I'm realizing that I've been talking a lot and we're already at 7 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and let Penny take this back over.
Okay. So, so Mary, how do you have a little bit of time past 7 where you
I
could
do.
entertain some questions?
I do.
So, family members, type in questions if you have those. We'll need to, kind of limit how many we can take, tonight. Mary, would you let everybody know if we don't get to those questions this evening, what's their best method for, getting questions answered? What would you like them to do? Have their students ask, or is there a particular email they can?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways. One is to have their student ask. We do try to give the students as much agency as possible. So sometimes it's good for them to be the ones that are coming in. Students can always make appointments with us. On that website we have, if you scroll down, there's a link to how to make an appointment with us. Family members are allowed to join in the appointments if they want to be in on the Zoom call and the student agrees, then we can do that. They can also email Freeman Abroad at tulane.edu. And they can call us at 504-865-5438.
Okay, so here are a couple of questions. When is the learning agreement due? And the question asked, does your office work over the summer? And the answer to that question is yes.
Oh, yes.
Your office staff will be here all summer. So we definitely work year round on the
Ew.
staff side of things. But when is the learning agreement due?
So it really is a loose deadline because each of our students is dealing with a different partner institution and their, availability of classes, and they're navigating all this information. So we have a deadline in the portal for that, but it's not hard and fast. We really want students to feel like they can come to us and ask these questions whenever they're ready. But we have had a lot of students submitting their learning agreements already.
Okay, here's a multi-part question. So, what happens if help is needed in the summer from the Freeman Study Abroad office? So we already took care of that. Your staff will be working through the summer.
Mhm.
Can a student take classes that count towards a minor, like a core psychology class? I know they can't take core major classes, only business electives. So I guess,
Okay,
can
so
they take classes that'll count towards other elements of the core curriculum requirement?
oh, I see. Yeah, so the business core are certain classes, and then they have business electives. Outside of that, they have the NTC requirements. So if a student takes a class in art history, for example, and they want to have that count as their aesthetic and creative arts requirement, then they petition to have that counted, and they usually have to submit syllabus, maybe some work completed. And they typically do that after they've attended the course. And that is a different procedure. If they
Okay.
wanted to count towards like a psychology minor, then they would apply for that credit through the psychology department. Our office has the forms to get students started with those processes. So the student would just talk to us about it.
Let's see. How does BLS know where to send the passport back? Since the cheat sheet says to use their New Orleans address on the visa application.
There is a courier service form that I acquired today from BLS International. It's not on their website. I've asked them to put it on there. So we'll be sending that to students shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to have to provide detailed instructions, and also the students can sign up for the SMS updates so they can get a text when their passport is being sent back to them with that visa in it.
The next question is, my student who is going to Spain already received a letter from the Freeman Abroad office to submit with the visa application. Should she still expect to receive another letter regarding Geo Blue?
Yes.
Okay. Next question. For Copenhagen, it says classes in January 31st. Are our Tulane students for sure not expected to stay past the December holidays there?
Correct. So if you go on that brochure page for Copenhagen, where we have academics, students, most of the classes actually finish their exams in December, but some of the classes that they can't get to complete in December, the students are allowed to take those exams remotely. So either that would be something proctored by our office, which we can do, or, handled through with Copenhagen. But most of the courses, they finish before the students leave.
Next question. Does the Geo Blue 24 cover weekend travel, or do they need to purchase additional policies for coverage?
No, the Geo Blue covers them internationally while they're abroad. It does not cover them domestically. So if they come home, that domestic insurance would be in play.
Okay.
But as long as they're abroad, they're fine.
Okay. Next question is, my son still hasn't received his acceptance letter from UniMel, and he has to be on campus the first week of July. When should we begin to panic, since we also need time to apply for the study visa, which seems to be a lengthy process?
Don't panic.
Okay.
So Australia has an all electronic student visa application process, and the university there is very well aware of, all of their, I don't know, hundreds of exchange students needing this. It's actually a certificate of eligibility that you need in Australia. And the processing time, I've seen it as fast as a few minutes, or as long as like a couple of weeks, but it comes electronically in an email, and then your passport information is digitally, so you're not mailing your passport off, you're submitting documents online. It's much easier for Australia. It's more expensive, but the visa application process for Australia is relatively quick and simple.
Okay. The next question is, the Swiss visa requires a letter that tuition has been paid. Does the Freeman Abroad office provide that?
We provide a letter that says that the student, I'm not exactly sure of the wording, but if the visa letter we provide needs to be looked at, the student can let us know.
Is the
Like
being
every
nominated, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is the being nominated process competitive, or is everyone who wants to go to a school, are they nominated?
Okay, so the application process and the placement process is where the competition happens. After a student is placed by us at a school and we nominate them, there's no competition.
Do you connect students who are going on the same program together? Like, I would assume that
Yeah.
means like now before they travel.
Yeah, we do. So for the students going to ICADE in Spain, it's a lot of students. So we provide them with a spreadsheet in their portal. The rest of the students, we generally do it via email. We send them a group email, and then we're like, okay, talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
And they can choose how to communicate with each other from there.
How long does it take for the secondary school to approve the application? The JAW school, ZHAW,
Correct.
for example?
Well, that's they're a separate institution from us, so we don't necessarily have that information. If a student is worried, they can ask us, or they can reach out to the partner institution, but usually a timeline is given to the student by the partner. Some of our partners wait until the application deadline before they process their secondary applications. Some of them do it on a rolling basis.
Next question is, for students going to Copenhagen, the CBS program, do they not need to get a visa before traveling there?
Yeah, this has been a confusing thing for me.
Okay.
They don't technically need a visa to enter the country as long as they're a US citizen. They can enter on the automatic tourist visa, and then they have to apply for a residency permit. If they want to, they can apply for the residency permit before they enter Denmark, in which case it's an easier process. So they have that choice, but then once they have the residency permit, then they need to apply for what's called a CPR number, which is almost like our social security number that they're going to have to do. So some of them want to have that residency permit done before they enter the country, but some say it's easier to wait. It's up to the individual student.
The next question is, Zurich requires proof of health insurance, or they have to get local coverage. Does Geo Blue work for Zurich?
It should.
Okay.
Some countries do require that students purchase their own domestic health insurance. Australia is one of those. And so sometimes students just have to, do that.
For Copenhagen, my student received a visa letter from Freeman Study Abroad. Will they also receive a letter from Copenhagen Business School with the ST1 and formal letter from CBA?
They'll at least receive the ST1 from Copenhagen.
If Tulane proposes the student to the international school, can we assume they will be accepted by the host university?
Yes.
And the next question is there a specific form my student needs to submit related to academic accommodations, like the kind of thing the Goldman Center would do? Does the Goldman Center provide documentation for the other school?
Yeah. Usually it's in the form of a letter, but if the school has a form, then the student should fill out that form. It just depends on what the school asks the student to provide. But usually Goldman can, and we usually don't get involved for privacy reasons. So that's usually between the student, the Goldman Center, and the accommodation office at the host institution.
Does your website for Copenhagen break down the specifications for a free mover student? That this might be different than a regular admit or exchange?
Yeah, we're getting in the nitty-gritty here.
Okay.
We don't put that on the website. In general, that's a favor that was done to us by Copenhagen. And so they have assured us that they will treat students the same.
How do they get the residency permit for Copenhagen before they leave the US?
That information is in the portal, and we reference students to Copenhagen, and CBS also sends instructions about that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a detailed process.
Okay, so we're almost finished with the questions, just a couple more. So this person says they just want to double check that Switzerland requires a visa type D. Is that correct?
Sounds right, but I would go to the website. If I were meeting with a student right now, I'd go to the Swiss website and do that visa, what did I call it? Like you can click on little things and fill out little things, and they tell you what kind of visa you're going to need.
Like it kind of gives you a matrix or guides you through different things to get to the specific one.
To
Okay.
make sure you're applying for the correct visa.
How much do we need to worry if a student's medication is not legal in the host country? Have you seen issues with that in the past, Mary?
I've never seen a student arrested, but I would never advise a student to bring an illegal substance into a country. So, sometimes there are substitutes. Like for Adderall, for our students that I used to take to Japan, they would talk to their provider before, in a period of time before the program, and then get sort of used to this new medication that wasn't illegal.
So talk with their doctor, get a recommendation for an alternative,
Mm-hmm.
start on that so they have some transition time while they're still here under their US doctor's care.
That would be my recommendation.
Get used to it. Okay. Next question is for Copenhagen. Will the student hear about housing, or when will the student hear about housing? And do you have a phone number for World Travel Services? So that the World Travel Services number would be on the website, on the Freeman website.
It's not on our website. It's on the travel management website, I believe, or in Concur.
Okay.
Actually, I think the students, when they log into Gibson and they click on Concur, that's where they can get the World Travel Services. They have an email address. They have a couple of telephone numbers.
Okay. So for Copenhagen, when would the students hear about housing?
Oh, thanks. So the students should have a Copenhagen email address by now. I think their deadline was yesterday. Once they have the Copenhagen email, that information is sent to them via Copenhagen email, not Tulane email.
Okay.
When
So
it's
one-
sent, I do not know.
Okay.
Sorry.
One question was, is there access to this presentation somewhere? So this person might have tuned in a little bit late. So we always post a PDF of the webinar slides on the Family Programs webinar page on our Family Programs website, and that's just families.tulane.edu. Navigate to communication and then webinar, and you'll be able to see that. Give us a couple of days to make some edits and just finalize things. And so both the video of the live presentation and the PDF of the slides will be there. I will also email that information to everyone who registered for the webinar. So again, just kind of wait to receive an email with that information. I'll just send it to you directly, but then you could also find it just by navigating on the website. So I'm just going to take these last couple of things, and they're just really comments. Copenhagen Business School is offering a resident permit webinar. And students received an email to their CBS email about that. So that's good information for everybody. And then somebody followed up and said that they saw type D student visa on the Swiss consulate website.
Love this.
So let's see. So this will be our last question.
Okay.
When can students expect to receive 2 blue letter required for Spain so they can apply for the visa?
GeoBlue.
GeoBlue. Okay.
Yeah, we're working on that. It's going to come soon.
Okay.
Probably this week or next week.
So,
It's a special request, so it takes a little time.
okay. So Mary, do you have any final comments that you want to make? Parting words to share with everybody? What your best piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, my best piece of advice for families is not to panic. I think it is really important to give the students space to work through all of this information and to, give them some grace. They're not going to be perfect, and provide assistance whenever possible, but also let them work through the hard times as well. It's a real tough thing to navigate, but I think the most important thing is just don't panic. Don't raise the anxiety levels.
Right.
So, and there the cleaning person is kicking me out of my office. So
Oh, okay. So we do need to wrap up, everybody. And I just want to say that I think that a study abroad experience is one of the most growthful opportunities a university student will ever have. And so they're not only learning all of the academic content, but they learn so much about themselves, and they might have some stumbles at some point in the beginning or throughout the experience, but I think that learning to navigate that and, finally succeeding through those challenges just enhances their ability to navigate all kinds of other things once they come back. And so I think that, kudos to your student for applying and being accepted to this. And I think you, in some ways, you won't recognize how much more mature your student will be once they return to you. So we really hope that this is a positive experience for them, and that you enjoy seeing the growth that it will produce in them.
Thanks for saying that, Penny. I say that so much, I forget that it's important for people to hear. In my 29 years of study abroad experience, I've seen thousands of students completely transformed. Really, it is, I mean, I get goosebumps when I say these things, because I just think it is so important for us to become global citizens and to really learn to function in the world.
Well, thank you, everyone. As I said, I'll the webinar slides and the video will be posted on families.tulane.edu. But for all of you who registered in advance, we'll send it to you directly, but give us a couple of days to get all that sorted and you'll see it. And we hope that you'll be able to review that information, be a good support for your student, and they'll have a great experience. So thank you everyone for your interest in this topic. If you want to leave any quick comments about the webinar, you can do that and type that in really quickly before I close. But we also welcome your comments and feedback about the webinar at families@tulane.edu. That's the website, the email address that'll come to me. And if you have suggestions for other webinar topics, we appreciate hearing that from parents as well. So we hope you have a great evening, and thanks so much for joining us. Good night.